Alright, so this is Caesar's de Bello Gallico, chapter 5, section 36. And this is going to be, since we're in the middle of a battle, and it's not going very well for the Romans. As you know, if you read 35, Coda's hurt. He got hit in the mouth with a sling. They're dying, but they're dying virtuously. Caesar kind of like throws that in there to make sure he shouts out to the soldiers and how well they're doing, even though it's looking grim for them. Sabinus is going to see Ambiorix, and he's going to try to plead with him. He's going to try to negotiate his way out of this, and it's probably not going to work, and that's kind of a spoiler. It's not going to end well for the Romans. So without further ado, let us get to reading on this relatively short section. His rebus permotus quintus titurius cum proco ambiorigem suos cohortantem conspexis et interpretem suum gnaeum Pompeium ad eum mitit rogatum ut sibi militibus quae parcat. Alright, so we see a couple ablatives right away here. They're going with permotus, but they don't agree. It's simply a participial clause, and permotus being our participle, our PPP, perfect passive, it goes with Quintus Titurius, and he's our subject of our main clause. Then we see cum, we bracket that guy. Procol ambiorigem suos cohortantem, we see that NT right there, and we think, it's a participle, and suos kind of goes in it as it's kind of sandwiched between cohortantem and ambiorigem, which do agree. So we have here a present active participle and its clause with suos, and then we end our cum clause at conspexisset. This is a subjunctive, it's pluperfect. So actually, we're going to probably say this is circumstantial, just based on context, and we'll get there in a second. Interpretem suum gnaeum Pompeium, a series of accusatives that all mean the same thing. Suum goes with interpretem, gnaeum Pompeium is giving a name of that interpretem. And then we have ad eum is a preposition going with mitit. Rogatum, another PPP. That's actually agreeing with eum instead of Pompeium. That is simply because he's not asking Pompeius to do anything. He's asking Ambiorix to do something, and eum is referring to Ambiorix. All right. Note that Gnaeus Pompeius is not Pompey the Great. This is not Caesar's big rival. This is probably simply somebody from his family who is in Caesar's army as an interpreter. This happened all the time, where you get these family names that you know and love because they would call in favors and get their people put into the army to get them some experience in the military. This is not unusual. But anyway, with the verb of asking, we then have an ut clause. The ut clause would then be an indirect command, because it has the verb of asking rogatum right there. And then sibi militibus, those are both datives, because parcat, parco, is to spare. Parco takes a dative, to spare. All right. Maybe to give mercy to, if you want to translate with the dative. Okay, so we can go ahead and just translate away. Having been influenced by these things, Quintus Titurius, when he had caught sight of Ambiorix urging on his guys, he sends his interpreter, Gnaeus Pompeius, to him. Note that suum, by the way, is going with Quintus Titurius. It's his interpreter, the one that speaks Gallic for him. Sends his interpreter, Gnaeus Pompeius, to him, having been asked that he spare him and his troops. Okay, so the request is to spare Quintus Titurius, who we know is actually Sabinus, and his troops. We'll see if that works, considering he already betrayed him once. Gripping stuff. Let's move on. Ille appellatus respondit. Si velit secum colloqui licere, sperare a multitudine impetrare posse, quod ad militum salutem pertineat. Sorry, it's subjunctive. So we have here ille. Ille is, of course, our pronoun he, that guy, referring to ambiorix, so we'll say that's a subject. Appellatus is, of course, modifying it as a P from appello, appellare, and then responded. This is how he responds. Now note that we're going to have an indirect statement for this responded. But if we bracket off, we see that we start with a C clause, actually. So si velit secum is a preposition. It's like cum se. And colloqui, because colloqui is actually an infinitive, and that kind of goes with the velit. Velit is to want in the subjunctive, and it takes an infinitive still. So that infinitive is going with velit. Then licere is, of course, our main verb in the indirect statement here. And then here we can have another clause in an indirect statement. Sperare, there's the infinitive right away. And it means to hope, which means that there's another head verb, and that means we have another indirect statement in the middle of an indirect statement, because why not? And actually, sorry, I misbracketed here. We're actually going to bracket all the way through pertineat, because the quote clause goes in there too, but we'll get to that in a second. A multitudine is a preposition. Impetrari is an infinitive. We'll label that one INF, and we see that posse is right here. Posse is, of course, to be able. That explains impetrari as a complementary infinitive. And then we see quod. Quod here doesn't have an antecedent. Usually that means because. However, here it means it's a noun relative clause. That is because we do not have a subject of posse, and this whole quod clause is acting as the subject of posse. That's why we have to include it in our red bracket there. Then we have ad militum salutem. Remember, militum is not an accusative, and therefore ad has to keep going all the way through salutem. Which means that militum is a genitive, kind of going with salutem here. Cool. And then pertineat is our subjunctive, mostly because it's a clause within a clause, and with this kind of double subordination, you're going to get subjunctive verbs often. Anyway, let's translate now. He, having been called, responds that if he wants to speak with him, it is allowed. He responds that he hopes that it which pertains to the safety of his troops is able to be obtained from the multitude. And remember, ambiorix has to run, so he says he has to run everything by the people in the state. Remember before, earlier in chapter 5, he said, like, my people, my state compelled me to do things. This kind of shows, first of all, that the Gauls are largely not democratic, but they at least had a voice of the people represented. And so ambiorix always has to kind of run everything by, or at least he says he does. He seems to not really care, but and do everything he wants. But he always uses that rhetoric as if to kind of remove responsibility from himself. So here he's kind of again using that to say, well, like, well, I'll try. I want it to be, but you never know with these people that are making decisions. So those multitudes, right? But anyway, yeah, that's all it has to do here. But it looks like Ambiorix is on board, although we've already kind of seen Ambiorix try to trick them once, so I'm suspicious, but I think Sabinus is probably gullible as always, so let's read on. Ipsi vero nihil nocitum iri, inque eam rem se suam fidem interponere. Ille cum cota saucio communicat, si videatur pugna ut excedant et cum ambiorige una colloquantur. And here we, of course, start with ipse, probably a dative, because we know our pronoun endings have I ending datives, so this is going to be dative, just like illy would be dative. Ipsi is also dative. Vero is an adverb, which means kind of truly. Nihil, of course, is indeclinable. Here it's probably the subject, since we don't really have room for. Actually, it is accusative subject, because we're still an indirect statement. I apologize. So yes, we do have an accusative subject. We are still an indirect statement with the response by Ambiorix. Because then we have nocitum iri, which is a very, very weird and rare form. So yeah, you do know probably that it's from noceo, and you know that to mean to harm. So that's good if you caught that nocitum comes from noceo. However, I will just tell you, because this is absurd, you're never going to see this again probably, that this is the future passive infinitive. And you're like, well, I thought that the nd with the um with the essay is a future passive infinitive. No, that's a future passive periphrastic showing purpose in the infinitive. The future passive infinitive, however, is extremely rare, and it uses the passive form of to go, which shouldn't exist but does, with iri, with the participle nocitum. If that just confused you, it's okay. Just note that it's the future passive infinitive and move along, because I'm never going to test you on that, and hopefully the AP test will not either. If they do, that's very upsetting. All right. In que. Well, que here is connecting two clauses, because in starts a preposition. Boom. And then we have se, suam, fidem, interponere. A lot of accusatives. We see suam going with fidem. Se is accusative, which means it's the subject of interponere. So here you have S, there's a V. And just follow along when I translate that future passive infinitive. That's going to be insane. And I guess I'll do that right now. We'll do one sentence at a time here. So that, remember, he responded, that truly to him nothing will be harmed. In other words, if we want to translate this a little bit nicer, literally, I just gave it to you, kind of means to him no harm will be done. Let's just do that. No harm will be done. All right. And into this thing, he places his trust. Okay. So that's good. It means that Ambiorix is saying, like, well, no harm will come to you, and it's like he's promising that he puts his faith in that, which just means that he's kind of promising it. All right, and then down below we have ille as our subject, as our nominative. Cum cota saucia. Now here cum is followed by an ablative, so we have to make sure we use as a preposition with him. Communicat. We get a word communicate from that, so it shouldn't be that hard. But that also means that we are starting some kind of clause when we talk, right? And here we have si. Now si can mean if, but it can also mean whether as an interrogative. Put a little question mark there. And which means that the videatur, being subjunctive, that is going to actually be the beginning of an indirect question, which is cool. All right. And then we have, of course, our clause that's all acting, or clause is actually with the et there, that's all acting as our subject of videatur. So this is fun. We'll continue on though. Pugna, I will tell you, is ablative, mostly because we have an X kedant, and X usually has to do with separation, and separation is an ablative-y thing, so we're doing that. So we are kind of gapping in the Romans here with the they for X kedant with the NT, so keep that in mind. Et here connects X kedant there, and oops, sorry. Let me draw more clear arrows. Et here connects X kedant and coloquantur, or the whole clauses that go with them at least. Cum ambiorige, boom, we have a preposition just like we had cum cota, now we have cum ambiorige. Una, as you probably know from seeing it a few times now, is actually an adverb, means as one or together. And then coloquantur is a compound of loquor, and you know that. So our translation goes something like this. He talks with Kota, wounded. Saukyo agrees with Kota. He's wounded. Remember, he got hit in the mouth with a rock from a sling, so that's always painful. Anyway, he, Sabinus, Ille is Sabinus, talks with wounded Kota, and kind of, it's almost like a saying, whether it seems what? Well, seems, when kind of hanging out by itself, seems right. Just kind of gap that in, okay? Whether it seems right that they leave from the fight and talk together with Ambiorix. So he's kind of asking Kota, he's like, do you think it's cool that we go leave the fight and talk to Ambiorix a little bit? I think it's interesting that Sabinus is finally taking advice from Kota, given the debate that happened to get them into the situation. But anyway, let's move on to see what Kota has to say about this. Sperare abeo de sua ac militum salute impetrare posse. Now here we have just a bunch of infinitives, and I've written at the top communicat because that is, remember, he was talking with Kota. Sabinus was talking to Kota, and this is kind of what he says to Kota, kind of as the indirect statement. We have a lot of indirect statements in this passage, so make sure you're marking them. Anyway, this whole thing, we're kind of gapping in. Oops, sorry, that's highlighter. There we go. Now we're gapping in, of course. Say, that's Sabinus. And then we have our infinitive verb here, and we know that sperare is to hope. It's actually a very similar construction as earlier in this passage, where we then are going to have another indirect statement, just like that. And then we have abeo de sua ac militum salute. Sua agrees with salute. Militum is a genitive going with salute. And then we have impetrare, an infinitive. And then posse, an infinitive. Of course, posse is an ACI. And thus takes an infinitive, which is the complementary impetrare. All right, this is a pretty easy one to translate, so we're just going to do it. You can remember, you're kind of gapping in, like he said, that he hopes that it is possible to be granted by him concerning their and their soldiers' health, their own and their soldiers' health. In other words, he hopes that it's possible to save them because they're going to die. It's kind of odd wording. He hopes that it is possible to be granted by him, who is, of course, by him is Ambiorix. And of course, de is it's not as much like something directly being granted in the accusative, but it is here in a preposition concerning their health, their well-being. So it it has kind of an ambiguous feel to it. Something having to do with their well-being and health. Okay, be granted. So we kind of that idea. And this, I think this is pretty much the wording here is saying that they're pretty much looking for anything they can get at this point. But anyway, let's finish this passage up. And here Coda finally responds, Coda se ad armatum hostem iturum negat atque in eo perseverat. Okay, so we have Coda here. He, of course, is nominative as the subject, and then say, looks like he himself is going to start a clause going to iturum, which is gapping of an essay. And then negat is our verb for denying. Of course, I'm sorry, I missed ad armatum ostem, which is a preposition. I should have bracketed that first. I apologize. Atque in eo perseverat. Remember, in eo is another preposition, and then perseverat, another verb going with Coda. So we have Coda and negat, perseverat. Those are kind of our main parts of our clause. Anyway, negat is to deny, so we're going to begin here. Coda denies that he will go to an enemy having been armed. This is kind of Coda, again, doing the right thing. When you have an enemy that's armed, you do not go to him without arms, asking him to negotiate. He is going to kill you. So Coda kind of sees through the entire Ambiorix's apology and talking and things, since he already betrayed him once. Coda is now saying, well, no, I deny that I will go to an armed enemy. And he endures in this. In other words, he does not change his mind this time. Coda is probably very irritated, probably bleeding from the mouth and fighting tooth and nail to survive. And now Sabinus is asking to trust Ambiorix again. Coda is probably very angered at this, which is why he kind of just says, I am not going and I will not go. And he endures in this, so it says. So we have, again, Sabinus trying to make bad decisions. Coda, again, saying what should be said, except this time I think he's a little bit more firm with his decision since the first one backfired. Anyway, hope that makes sense. Email me if you have questions, and watch the next video.